Between the Arabian Peninsula and the coast of Iran sits a stretch of ocean exactly 21 miles wide. For a commercial supertanker, that distance represents a few hours of routine navigation. Every single day, between 17 and 21 million barrels of crude oil and petroleum products are forced through this tight passage. That accounts for roughly 20% of the entire global oil supply, squeezed through one specific set of coordinates. The full 21 miles aren't even usable. Because of shallow surrounding waters, those supertankers are confined to two distinct 2-mile lanes, one for inbound traffic and one for outbound, separated by a narrow 2-mile buffer zone. There is no pipeline network on Earth capable of handling this volume as a bypass. If those 4 miles of navigable water become impassable, the global industrial economy loses its primary energy artery overnight. By 2026, the diplomatic restraint that historically kept those waters safe has vanished. Following intelligence assessments that Iran crossed the nuclear breakout threshold, meaning they possess the technical capacity to construct a weapon within weeks, the region fell into an undeclared kinetic conflict involving Israeli airstrikes, Iranian missile barrages, and the United States military. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps is actively weaponizing the Strait of Hormuz in response. They have spent decades building a multi-layered maritime denial strategy, heavily relying on massive fleets of small, highly maneuverable fast attack boats designed to swarm and cripple much larger commercial targets. Military victory is not the objective here. Iranian forces do not need to defeat the U.S. Navy's Fifth Fleet. They simply need to deploy enough sea mines, launch enough coastal cruise missiles, and create enough physical chaos in those shipping lanes that commercial maritime insurers refuse to underwrite the voyages. Once the insurers pull out, the shipping companies stop moving the oil. The United States is better insulated against this physical disruption than it was in decades past. Because the American shale revolution turned the country into a net oil producer, a closed strait means domestic gasoline surging toward $10 a gallon and a severe inflationary shock, but the physical fuel supply would remain intact. The real mathematical catastrophe happens thousands of miles away. To see what a closed strait actually breaks, we have to track the supertankers heading east toward the Pacific. Japan operates one of the most advanced industrial societies on Earth. Yet its infrastructure, every bullet train, factory, and grid, runs entirely on imported fuel. This area chart illustrates the scale of that vulnerability. Japan imports roughly 90% of its energy. When you look closely at the crude oil portion, 88% of that specific supply comes directly from the Middle East, requiring passage through the Strait of Hormuz. If those shipments stop, the financial reaction is instantaneous. Because energy markets price future expectations into current contracts, a sudden 20% drop in global physical supply triggers immediate panic buying. Traders bid against each other just to secure barrels, sending global oil prices surging to somewhere between $150 and $250 within a matter of hours. Japan holds a strategic petroleum reserve, designed to cover about 180 days of normal consumption. But purchasing replacement crude or drawing down national reserves to operate commercial refineries at $200 a barrel rapidly drains sovereign wealth. It is a financial bleed a nation can only sustain for so long. Without a steady flow of affordable Middle Eastern oil, the math stops working. Within weeks of a closure, Japan's heavy industry faces systemic paralysis. Electricity generation becomes prohibitively expensive, and the national grid becomes susceptible to rolling blackouts. A few hundred miles away, China faces a remarkably similar supply problem. They operate the world's largest industrial base and require 11 million barrels of foreign crude every single day to keep their assembly lines running. There is an assumption that China can simply buy its oil over land from Russia. This bar chart compares those two delivery methods, and the physical disparity is severe. The maximum physical capacity of Russian overland pipelines is a fraction of what China currently imports by sea. You simply cannot pipe enough oil across Siberia to replace the thousands of supertankers arriving from the Persian Gulf. An overnight doubling of energy costs hits China at the exact moment its domestic economy is already managing a heavy property sector debt crisis and persistent deflationary pressures. The sudden spike in industrial input costs acts as a catalyst, accelerating those internal economic fractures. South Korea and Taiwan share this exact vulnerability profile. Both rely heavily on Hormuz energy to power their sprawling, high-tech manufacturing sectors, operating the semiconductor fabrication plants and assembly lines that build the components of the modern digital world. When oil spikes to $200 a barrel, moving goods across the ocean becomes incredibly expensive. But more importantly, operating the Asian factories themselves becomes mathematically unsustainable. Production lines stop, and the global supply chain for electronics, machinery, and automotive parts simply freezes. The secondary shockwaves from this disruption expand outward based on economic fragility. In parts of South Asia and Africa, nations that import both their fuel and their food are hit first and hardest. Modern agriculture is deeply energy-intensive. Diesel runs the tractors, natural gas produces the fertilizer, and ships transport the grain. When energy prices triple overnight, agricultural production costs surge, driving the price of staple crops out of reach and triggering severe food security crises across the developing world. Meanwhile, the industrial shutdown in Asia boomerangs back toward the West. As maritime shipping costs explode and Asian output craters, the flow of manufactured goods to the United States and Europe dries up. This creates an impossible dilemma for Western central banks. They are suddenly forced to fight oil-driven inflation at the gas pump while simultaneously managing a severe shortage of manufactured physical goods. Raising interest rates to stop inflation risks a deep recession, but doing nothing allows the cost of living to spiral out of control. Domestic energy production cannot shield you from a fully integrated global market. An energy blackout in the East dictates the availability of basic products and the immediate cost of living in the West. Since 1980, the global economy has relied on a specific strategic promise known as the Carter Doctrine. It stated explicitly that the United States would use military force to ensure the free flow of oil through the Persian Gulf. The entire system of globalized manufacturing, shipping raw materials to Asia and finished products back to the West, was built on the assumption that the U.S. Navy could keep those sea lanes open against any threat. The military escalation in 2026 tests that doctrine against modern technology. Advanced drone swarms and ballistic missiles mean an adversary no longer needs naval superiority to close a chokepoint. They just need to make the passage too risky for commercial insurers to underwrite, bypassing the American military advantage entirely. Every piece of the modern consumer experience, from the grocery bell to the interest rate on a car loan, hinges on the stability of those 21 miles. When that stability breaks, the resulting inflation acts as an immediate drain on household savings, while the government's response can make personal debt far more expensive. Because this global guarantee is no longer absolute, taking personal steps to reduce high-interest debt and adjust emergency funds for supply shocks is no longer optional.